Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chillin with Quillin. I am super excited to kick off this series of conversations with game changers and disability advocates and people who are super helpful in being champions for helping us get people hired and to work. And today I am so grateful to have a friend, Becky Jackson-Curran, who is with us. And she is just an incredible advocate for people with disabilities. She's also a wonderful TEDx speaker, and she's been at the forefront of so many initiatives from Hollywood to the business world to just personal. And her impact has been felt in so many ways. So I don't want to take too much of her thunder. And my first question, I want to just welcome you, Becky. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, I thought we would just start maybe with you just telling us a little bit about you and about how you got into being an advocate for people with disabilities.
So in a digital world, it may be a little hard to tell, but I am a person with dwarfism, and there are only about 65,000 people with dwarfism in the United States and maybe around 1.5 million worldwide. So it's a small population. And when people see us in the media, historically, people with dwarfism have been portrayed as leprechauns, elves, circus freaks. You don't really see many human perceptions. So at an early age, I really wanted to figure out, how do I help influence the change of what we see in the media, because that does impact the portrayals of society and how they react to our differences. It wasn't easy just to get started and do that. It was a grandiose dream of mine. And I had a great support system growing up from day one and really built the shield around me that I didn't feel that even when people were reacting in weird ways because of what they had previously seen, I felt that I had a strong enough support system that I could ignore it. But I know there are other people out there that don't feel that same way and and may internalize every point, stare, laugh. And either way, whether I handled it well or not, we need to change the way that society reacts to us.
Sure.
So what I did is I went to school. I was a marketing major, and I thought marketing kind of helps me think about how to be creative and influence change. And I had some internships related to the entertainment industry specifically. This was in Providence, Rhode Island, where I went to school. So it wasn't a huge network of entertainment professionals, but of course, in every major city, there's usually a radio and news station and places where you can go and get that initial experience. So I worked at the NBC affiliate of in Providence, and I helped write scripts for publicity and promotions. And anytime a newscast would put on like a promotional event for the community over the weekend, I would help write those scripts and just got some experience on what it is to work at a news station. And while I was working at that station, the guy I was reporting to was very good friends with a casting director. And she was actually filming or working on the film Underdog by Disney. This was back in 2006. And Peter Dinklage, who has dwarfism, was in Underdog, and they needed someone to stand in for him. And usually people go on set and they stand in while the actor can just relax. And then when it's time to act, they can do the acting. And it really is helpful for especially children who are on movie sets, because they need to get a certain amount of schooling. So during that time, if a stand-in's there, can kind of fill the time while the production's setting up the scene, they can do the schooling and then come to the set when it's time to actually act. So a lot of little people end up working in the entertainment industry in that specific role because we are the height of children. But then in this case, I had the opportunity to actually be a stand-in for Peter Dinklage. But once I got the dates, I was told that the dates that I needed to be on set conflicted with my last 2 weeks of college. And of course, after my parents spent a lot of money helping me get a college degree, that wasn't going to fly. But I decided that I was going to use that networking opportunity to still help the casting director with the casting throughout the summer. And this was right after my senior year of college. While I was helping her out, I just got to know like all the people in Providence who wanted to be actors, even though it's not known as a big acting city. But I would have to call like 300 extras a day, and they would be willing to show up to set rather than going to life-threatening doctor's appointments. It was such a big deal to them. And I said, it's up to you. I just need 300 people to show up. So you tell me if you really need to be there or if you need to handle your health needs. But that experience made me realize how seriously people take the entertainment industry and how much power it has on the outer world. So I wanted to figure out, how do I get more positions in this industry? That was an internship that ended at the end of the summer. A little earlier on in my college years, I got involved in the organization Little People of America. I was not involved growing up. Maybe when I was really young, we went to a few meetings, but my parents let me decide if I wanted to be involved. But I thought, I have a great support system, my average height friends, like there's no need for me to get involved in this organization that makes me feel othered at
Right.
that point in time. But once in high school, my friends started dating and they really wanted to have that time to themselves and not bring me around. That's when I started experiencing social exclusion. And I knew that it would be beneficial to learn from other people who have similar lived experiences. So when I got to the Little People Convention right after my freshman year in college, I happened to meet a lot of people who lived out in California, just happened to be the people who I connected with the most. And that was a driving force. After that internship at the end of college, I thought, why don't I move out to LA and see how I can get more embedded in the entertainment industry? I was offered a job to work for a talent manager who also had dwarfism. And she said, come out to LA. And my parents told me, you need to have a job and a place to stay, and then we'll support your dreams of getting out to LA. I got out there, the job fell through. Made me realize, even though she has similar lived experience as a person with dwarfism, doesn't mean she's reliable. But my parents were helping me get settled. And because I had secured a place to stay, they told me that if you treat every day like a job, looking for a job, we will support your dream to continue staying out here. And I had to treat every day like a job, looking for a job. And I ended up sending out 1,000 resumes, went on 100 interviews over the course of 4 months. I did not put that I had dwarfism on my resume. Looking back, I kind of wish I did, just so I could have fewer interviews, but they could be more authentic and organic. But at that point in time, I was just rushing to find a job. And these were entry level positions. I was not applying to grandiose executive type jobs. I was willing to be in the mailroom or whatever it took
Sure.
to get my foot in the door. And finally, I found some temporary placement agencies. And I think they're really beneficial for the disability community because an agency can support you and pitch you to go work somewhere. And then that's a way that we can use our skills of adapting to worlds that aren't made for us to just work and show how hard we are at working. And then after that experience, I just continued to get different opportunities. And when I was there, I went through the temporary placement agencies. I had a month assignment at the Hallmark Channel. Then I worked for 2 days at this place called Trailer Park. And after that, I started getting calls about creative artist agency. And that was where the real opportunities began.
That's great. What a great just journey to being able to discover like how you could be an advocate and really change Hollywood in like such a positive way. And what a cool job too is like as far as standing in. That's really fantastic. Can you take me back, Becky, to like even before college and all of those things? Like, what was your very first job? Like your very first thing where you were paid, or what did that look like for you?
I was a sailing instructor. I grew up sailing and I was asked to be an instructor alongside my peers. I started at age 8, so whenever I was legally allowed to work, that was what I was able to do. And it was fun because I don't know how seriously we took the job, but like we did what we were supposed to do. $8 an hour. Was excited to be there and teach other kids how to sail.
Is there anything that you learned from that role that is still with you today?
In the job market, I think what's really important is just taking it seriously and proving yourself constantly. I don't think that I was able to do as much physically as my peers, but it was trying to allot the skills that I had to the things that I would be good at and then allow them to do the other things. And I think that also aligns with we often see job descriptions that say you must lift a 50-pound box. But there was a way for me to be a sailing instructor without having to do maybe some of those things that other people are open to jumping in and doing. And I hope that that also can exist in those job environments. Yes, we need to be truthful in the job descriptions of must lift a 50-pound box if it's really required. But I think it's often been a bias and something that people just put there to be a barrier to people with physical disabilities. So how do we not just have a blanket statement of this is what you have to do if you want to be a sailing instructor, but we're going to adapt and allow you to have this experience. And I think that was powerful and important.
That's great. I'm glad you brought up like barriers to the workplace because that's something that we see a lot just in our work at Bridges from School to Work. And I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about what barriers that you've seen firsthand in your pursuit of a career or even just in your work?
I think just the assumption that I can't do the same things that everyone else can do. So that
Mhm.
means that I'm not good for the job. And when I finally got my first permanent job in Hollywood, I really had to prove that I could do everything, even if it was really hard. I had
Mhm.
to get a water pitcher for my boss every day, and it had to be on her desk by the time she got to the office. And of course, I'm spilling the water all over me, but there was nothing I was going to say no to because I have to
Right.
constantly prove myself, work 10 times harder than the person next to me in order to be given a chance. And I think that's what people dismiss, that we have these skills because we're so used to adapting to a world that's not made for us. And we work 100 times harder than the person next to us because we don't take anything for granted.
Yes. Wow, that is really powerful. That is really powerful statement too in terms of talking about a world that's not necessarily made for you. Um, how like do you have any advice for how individuals can advocate for themselves in the workplace and advance their careers?
I think it's really important to advocate for the accommodations you need. I think it took me about 3 full-time jobs to actually feel encouraged to speak up about needing a step stool at my desk or needing a step stool to access the sink in the bathroom or the kitchen in the common areas. What I like to give a shout out to SAG-AFTRA where I worked for a few years because once I started there, they told me that they had an ergonomic specialist who I could meet with. And it felt like it wasn't something specific for me. It was something that everybody could benefit from. And then after that assessment, obviously it made sense for me to have a step stool at my desk so my legs wouldn't hang. And we thought, let's put a step stool in the bathroom area and then in the kitchen that was closest to where my desk was. But there were other kitchens and other areas that I may want to access. So a few weeks later, after that assessment, the head of administration thought, we need to add more step stools to other areas so Becky can access all the areas that people may go to, especially if she has a meeting on this side of the building. And I thought that was pretty powerful because that is going above and beyond the reasonable accommodation that is kind of listed in the Americans with Disabilities Act, but it really doesn't cost much.
No. Well, I think that's the thing. I think a lot of accommodations don't really end up costing
No.
hardly anything. It's such a fraction and
These step stools are 10 to $15. And, your friends at Marriott, I give them a hard time because I often ask them for a step stool, and I am very pleased with those who respond well and are able to have them. But I challenge them and say, if this can't be provided, like, I'm paying a lot of money for a room.
Right, right. Well, and they can provide a crib and all. There's so many other things that, people can access. So a step stool shouldn't be that hard.
One hotel I stayed at once, I thought it was a really great way to handle it. They told me they didn't have one, but then they went out and bought one. And when I got back to my room after dinner, there was a little Post-it note on top of the stool and said, "Thank you for your patience." Well, we went out and purchased a stool. And I'm fine with that. If you don't have it right away and you're willing to go get one,
Sure.
because really I don't need it till nighttime when I'm getting ready for bed anyways.
Right.
And I think it's a lot of it has to do with just open, honest communication. Because when I call in advance and say, I would like to have a step stool, they usually say, okay, we'll put it in your notes. But the carry through after that, and I think those are the accommodations that help me become more successful. My legs
Sure.
aren't hanging. I'm not going to fall off the chair. There are things that just keep me safe. And that allows me to feel more confident. And I think just with job descriptions in general, people need to be sure that they can do a majority of what's described in the description, but ask for those subtle accommodations that'll help you do it better.
Absolutely. What advice would you give directly to Bridges from School to Work participants, the students who are trying to navigate, figure out what they want to do, figuring out what that next step might look like? Is it college? Is it internships? Is it the military? Is it a job? I mean, there's so many different options today for our young adults to pursue. So, what advice would you give to them today?
I would say don't be afraid to reach out to people who are doing exactly what you want to do, because that's where you can get the most knowledge and understanding of what it requires and the steps that you need to take in order to get there. I think now there's a lot more openness to lines of communication, especially with tools like LinkedIn, where you can send people a message. And the worst thing someone could say is no, but why not give it a chance? And there are more opportunities that can come from giving it a chance than being afraid of a no and not doing it.
Absolutely. I wonder why. I feel like it's so much a part of the human spirit of being afraid of the no.
So someone asked me once when I was speaking at a school, "Are you afraid of what you think people think of you?" And it was a powerful question because I think I'm comfortable enough with myself. I'm comfortable enough with not caring about what people think. But then I have this vision in my head of, what do they really think? And,
Right.
oh, they must think this, and it's a barrier.
Right.
And I think that's it. People don't wanna inconvenience people, but you're missing out on the opportunity, and I think at the end of the day, people really like to mentor and help people. They may not even know it yet.
Correct.
And I remember my first mentorship experience. I was involved with Communities in School, a nonprofit organization in LA. It was affiliated with Creative Artists Agency where I was working. And I called my dad and said, I signed up to be a mentor. And he said, that's a big commitment. Like, you have to promise that you're going to stay in that person's lives. So, even on the mentor side, I want to advise people, when you say yes to being a mentor,
Mhm.
please stay consistent, because these people are used to people coming in and out of their lives.
Yep. It's big. I mean, you're not committing just to you're committing to a person and you're
Right.
making and it's a big deal because they're counting on you to give them advice and give them encouragement and give them uh, you know, direction and ideas for how they could be better and how they can move forward. So that's great. What about from the lens of an employer? What advice would you tell employers who are maybe looking at, hiring people with disabilities or they haven't hired anyone with a disability yet? What's your message to them?
I think self-identification and self-disclosure is key. I know you may be afraid of losing your own job if you bring that up, but if we can increase the numbers of people who identify as having a disability within the workforce and make that more public, then hopefully it can be considered the norm, where it's not a big deal to take that extra step and recruit people with disabilities. And I think executives, CEOs, please share any connection. There is no possible way that anyone on this planet does not have a connection with some type of disability. And I've also been thinking a lot lately. I hate to be morbid, but I unfortunately lost my infant son 4 years ago. And I've been thinking a lot about how none of us make it out alive. So why are we trying to be something that's so exclusionary when we could learn so much from those we include within our workspace and diversify it and make it more compelling? I remember I heard one of the stories in Hollywood. The Farley brothers, who also went to Providence College, have been very inclusive of the disability community in their films. And they said, we've never gotten so many hugs on set. Everyone ends the day getting hugs. And that's powerful.
It is.
You miss out on those opportunities if you exclude.
Yep. Nope, you absolutely do. And I think so many times employers, they just sometimes don't even recognize the abilities of the world of individuals with disabilities. Like there's so many talents and so many gifts.
And I think even on the individual with disability side, don't be afraid to find something you're passionate about and prove how capable you are by pursuing entrepreneurship. Because there's so many great opportunities if you take that path too. Because you don't have people saying no to you.
Right. And you've done that as a speaker, right? Could you tell us about what that's looked like for you?
So after I left California, it was very hard for me. I was definitely down in the dumps. I took a leap after 5 years at Creative Artists Agency and worked with CBS. And I worked for two people. One wanted me there, one did not. There was no real explanation, but I could just tell. So I never got the proper mentorship or learned the job properly, that I just felt completely discouraged. And I decided that I was going to take a pause and move back home. And that was really hard because it took me so long to get my foot in the door.
Right.
But I took the leap. I went back home. I needed the support system in my family. I also had a very close friend, and he was my roommate in California, who was diagnosed with ALS. And I was realistic that I couldn't take care of him, and his family needed to step in. But I couldn't imagine any other roommate. So I thought, let me just go home, get the support I need. That's what also felt weird, leaving, going all the way across the country. My family was so supportive of my dreams, but I've always had a strong family relationship. It's just that's where I needed to be at that point in time.
Sure.
So coming back to Boston, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I took that mindset that my parents gave me back in LA, and I treated every day like a job, looking for a job. My sister, who's a middle school teacher, said to me, my students hear so much about you. I would love for them to meet you. I thought, all right, how do I align with the treat every day like a job, looking for a job, and be productive? So I thought, why don't I start sharing my story with these students? In my head, I thought I was only an assistant in Hollywood. I didn't make it very far. Nobody really wants to hear my story. But I was wrong. They did. They didn't care. They just thought it was cool that I worked in Hollywood and met famous
Sure.
people. And that was the narrative. But they also had never met someone with dwarfism, so they could ask me all those questions. So then I thought, all right, I'm on to something. I knew that it wasn't going to pay the bills right away, but I was fortunate to be able to live at home with my parents for a little bit. I did deal with my own stigma of an adult with a disability living back home after living on my own for 6.5
Right.
years. But I figured it out and was thankful for their support. And then I went to a Little People regional meeting, and there were parents talking about their kids struggling in school. And my doctor, when I was really young, recommended try to keep her in the same school system so she's less likely to get bullied. And fortunately, my parents were able to do that. But I know some families can't control if they have to move to new cities for different things.
Yeah.
So I was able to find an opportunity to go to schools where a student was going from elementary to middle or middle to high school. They were going to meet a whole new group of people. I would talk to the administrators, let them know the accommodations I had growing up. And then I always said that this person may or may not ask for these things. But here's some ideas. And then I would talk to the whole student body, allow them to ask me the tough questions, so that student didn't have to feel as excluded once they made that transition.
Sure.
And it became a powerful experience because now some of these students are in college and graduating from college, and they still come up to me at events of how I helped them really feel more included in their schools. And that's really what it's all about. I do this for other people to make the path less hard. And from that, I just started looking at Rotary clubs, and anywhere where I could do a free speech or
Sure.
paid is always beneficial too. And if they can't pay me, then I'll do a video. So then I have some content that I can work from. And finally, I was Googling the word disability, and this organization called Understanding Disabilities said, "We have an opportunity for you to come to our schools. What's your rate?" I thought, oh, shoot, I have to come up with a rate? So this was about 6 months in, and I we came up with $300. It was a start.
Right.
So that was my first paid speech. And those schools where I went with to help the little people, I was able to get paid with those as well. So they came after that initial first paid speech. And then you just kind of guess. I think when you talk to people in the speaking world, no one really likes to share their rates, but you see what you can get out of people and then kind of compromise. Of course, if travel's involved, you want to make sure that's all covered so you don't have to compromise on travel expenses. And I had the opportunity to go to Kenya to help a little people organization launch there. And it was powerful. The trip didn't get confirmed until 24 hours before, but we had been talking about it for a little bit. When I first got the message about coming to Kenya, it was a week after I got kind of a scam message from the First Baptist Church of England. They said, "We have a $30,000 budget for you to come and speak in England." And it wasn't real. And of course, then when I get a message from Kenya, I'm thinking, all right, am I just getting scammed?
Right.
But it was a real person, and he called me and we figured out how I could go. And because I had a flexible schedule at that time, I did it. Of course, my parents didn't sleep the whole time I was gone, but it was powerful. And after that experience, I realized that I love speaking and I want to continue to do it, but I also want to be around a community of people and have a little bit more of a purpose working in a workplace. And that's when I had the opportunity to move to New York. And it was aligned with the timing of my first TEDx talk on disability representation in the media. So just from that point forward in jobs, I was transparent and open about my passion for public speaking, but knowing that it can't pay all the bills and
Right.
I want to be part of a larger environment. And then I kind of assess what makes sense to take time off for and do, or is this more aligned with the organization I'm working for? And should I kind of feed it through that? And just really being open about this work in speaking and sharing my story is really important because I know it can help others.
Who inspires you, Becky?
My dad, um, He's he went through a lot in his life when he was really young and was told that he wasn't gonna amount to anything, and he had a brother who was basically God and everyone admired, but his brother ended up taking his life from alcoholism, and dad ended up being the one who I think did really well for himself and made sure that he didn't raise me and my sister the way that he was raised. So he was a psychology major and made sure that he took the skills and basically like reverse parented because he didn't want us to experience what he had to go through. And at a young age, because my mom was a teacher, she had really good health insurance. And my dad was always self employed. And he thought, I want to let your mom have time off, but like a lot of teachers may take 5 years off to raise their kids, but she has really good insurance. So he stepped in and she was just able to retire earlier than her friends by going straight through. But we couldn't get pre existing condition insurance. when I had a doctor in Baltimore. So dad and I would take drives from Boston to Baltimore. And I think those road trips and just the experiences we had at an early age made us really close. And even as he's aging, he's still the one I turn to for advice and guidance. And we've just always been really close. And I always thank my parents for not giving me up for adoption, because it's very common in the dwarfism community, where parents want to try to fix their child or give them up for adoption or terminate before they're even born. And I'm blessed and thankful that I grew up in a family where they were going to do whatever it takes to give me the best life possible.
Sure.
And my mom and I have always maintained a really strong relationship too. Just think that because of the experiences dad and I had at an early age, it made us grow really close.
Sure. Do you have a favorite quote?
If you judge people, you have no time to love them. Mother Teresa. I think we need to turn assumptions into curiosity and give people a chance to shine.
I love that. What's next for you, Becky? Like, what do you want? What's left for you to tackle and accomplish moving forward?
I have a book in the works. It's called Just Call Me Becky, because people get so caught up on terminology. I want them to get to know me as a person and get to know others as a person, and then you'll learn what they want to be called.
Yep. Can you talk a little bit about like the importance of people first language? I always think that's a good message for people to know.
I think there's just so many assumptions out there of, oh, like they want to be called this or that. And you have to ask the person what's their preference. Because I think there's still a little bit of a divide of who prefers people first versus identity first. I serve on the board of the National Center on Disability and Journalism at Arizona State University. And they have this beautiful style guide we could put in the show notes where it goes into descriptions of different types of disabilities and the preferred terminology. It was initially meant as a communication guide for journalists, but I think it can be helpful for anyone communicating. And it's really important to get to know the person. But for me, I'm okay with either. But person first would be I'm a person with dwarfism. And then identity first would be little person or dwarf. I think the reason why there's a strong emphasis on person first is we want to be known as a human being.
Right. Right.
Don't get caught up on what we are.
Right.
But there are some moments where maybe it helps to use the terminology. I often tell the story of my best friend from college. She doesn't have dwarfism, but we've remained close since college. And we were going out to a bar crawl with her Irish friends from work. She works at Fidelity, so it has a large population of Irish folks. And
Sure.
we were getting ready to go to this event, and she gave them context in advance. I have a friend who's coming. She has dwarfism. Just a heads up, don't be dumb. And I think in those scenarios, it's helpful because whether or not they needed to know, they were kind and respectful in it. I didn't feel like they were being out of line, even after having some drinks.
Sure.
So I think there are moments where it does help to give some context in advance. It's not always necessary, but it helps take away some of the surprise factor, and you can really just focus on having a good time.
Right. Well, I think you create such a space, Becky, for people that they feel comfortable being able to ask you questions or ask you, your perspective. And I think that's powerful too.
I did have a speech once, and someone came up to me after she was about to marry into a family where she would have 3 sons. And she said, "What if the next person we see isn't as approachable as you are?" And I got kind of frustrated because I thought, you can still go up to them, say hello. If it seems like it's off or they're having a bad day, you could just end the conversation and say, have a nice day. But right now, you're getting in your own way. You're already afraid to interact with that next person without giving it a chance.
Yes. I think the desire for people to understand each other just goes such a long way,
Yeah.
for sure, both at school and in business.
And that's why I use a similar approach and style for both schools and the workplace, just making
Yeah.
sure people understand it's important to be kind, be open-minded, have open lines of communication. I think one of the issues that happened while I was at the job before I moved back home was they kept a list behind the scenes of all the mistakes I made and presented them to me at the last minute versus telling me up front when I made a mistake so we could work on it together. So then another style of a boss I had when I was working at the Actors Union, I'm always grateful for this approach. We would reflect on the mistake that happened and figure out how to do better in the future. It wasn't, oh, you messed up, you're never going to do better, you're done with this job. It was, let's reflect and talk about how to do better in the future. And that's a much better open communication, transparent style than we're going to keep a list behind the scenes so you don't know, and then we'll tell you when it's time to go.
So Becky, our participants that we work with every single day, sometimes they have so many different factors that are impacting them every day in terms of where they live and the challenges that they face. And I'm curious from your perspective, what advice would you give to participants that are facing really tough, difficult times?
I really try hard to find joy in each day. So even when I was going on all those interviews, I still found something fun to do with friends at night or even something fun that I could do on my own. I don't mind spending time on my own, even I was talking about being stuck somewhere, and I find ways to make the best of it. I know not everyone's an extrovert and it may be hard for them, but try to find a balance. I know the job search can be really tough, but find other things to do in the in-betweens. I was looking at a journal from during the time that I was going on all those interviews. I kept track of every single interview and how I was feeling, and it was pretty powerful. And in general, even with my grief more recently, I've found that journaling is really helpful. So if you need an outlet and maybe other people aren't giving you the responses that you hope for, write down your feelings and figure out how to pivot and show up differently if you're really feeling frustration. And also don't internalize things thinking that it's all you and that there's something wrong with you. Make sure that you give yourself some grace and it may just not be the right fit. And for every no, it can lead to the next right opportunity.
That's right. That's great advice. I got one more final question for you. And it relates to just that idea of inclusion and how can we create a world that is more inclusive of people and the human spirit.
I think we need to just be open to getting to know people. We often hear the school example where if you see someone sitting in the lunchroom alone, go up to them, get to know them. We don't need people to be going on this journey alone. And don't worry about maybe what your friends would think, because are they real friends if they're going to judge? And that can go in any environment. Think before you make a comment. Like when I get those point stares and laughs and the ridiculousness that comes with navigating the world as someone with a physical difference, I ignore what people say. And I hope that that makes them feel less because it's not impacting me. But it's also a larger issue that they're not comfortable with themselves. So if you find anyone making fun of you, it's not a you problem. It's a they need to work on themselves because nobody should make fun of anyone.
Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to share?
I want others to share their story. I don't think there are ever going to be too many speakers or too many storytellers because we need to be reminded that we're not alone. And there was a workshop that I did once where it was an unconscious bias workshop, and they had you pair up with people who you thought you had nothing in common with. You just look around the room, try to find someone who looks nothing like you. But then the exercise was find 3 things you don't have in common. And it was a lot harder than one may think. So I think if you kind of take that exercise and try it in everyday life, you'll realize that you have a lot more in common than not, even with someone who looks nothing like you. And oftentimes people look at me and my short stature and they're surprised when I can have a conversation. Even so, someone who may have neurodiversities, they also need to be given a chance. They may communicate differently. But just let us show up and support us along the way. I think I enjoy encouragement because I want to make sure that I'm on the right track.
Right.
So never be afraid to tell someone you're doing great, or we should do a little bit of a pivot so this can go better. And I think constructive feedback is the number one. People assume that they can't give constructive feedback to the disability community. Even with those 100 interviews I went on, if people gave me constructive feedback, I would know how to do better in the next interviews. It's very possible I wasn't looking put together after driving around LA and going to 4 interviews a day. Let's talk about the reality of that scenario. I probably looked a mess after interview number 3, and I needed to be told that. But nobody felt comfortable telling me that.
I think it's Brene Brown that says clear is kind.
Yes. Just tell me.
It's so easy to know,
And I wouldn't want to be in those environments if they didn't want me there, but at least let's be real up front.
Yeah. Well, Becky, I really appreciate you coming on and chilling with Quilleon here today.
Yes.
Talking all things. And I hope you continue to champion all these incredible initiatives and helping make the world a better place. We definitely need more Beckys doing that, especially in the space for people with disabilities to get jobs.
Yes.
And I really appreciate your continued advocacy. And if there's ever anything that we can do to help support you at Bridges from School to Work, I hope you'll definitely reach out.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.